Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition, mandatory minicamp edition of the program. I am Braden Gall. That is Zach Lyons, and we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group, live across all platforms and on every podcast app on the planet. Zach, how are you, sir? Good afternoon.
I'm doing good. Mandatory minicamp is a wrap. It hasn't been announced yet, but OTAs are still possible next week, so we'll see what happens. You guys I don't think are allowed, but
we are not allowed, and I have a feeling that they will still have things going on, but that not everything will happen. That's my guess.
Yeah,
that's my guess. But we have a whole lot to discuss today. Will Levis and Brian Callahan's scheme. We saw a lot of 7-on-7 this week. We saw it in the bubble on Tuesday. We saw it in red zone on Wednesday, and we saw a lot sort of in the middle of the field today. And we'll try to break all of that down for you. Quarterback struggling across the board. Scheme getting better and then worse and then better again. So we'll discuss all of that, some quarterback stuff today, as well as I promised I would watch the pass rushers and the edge rushers and the front seven unit. So some interesting linebacker rotations, some interesting stuff on the edge rushers as well. No Simmons and no Sweat the entire week, but we'll break that down today as well. So lots of stuff to get to, of course, on the show. Make sure you check out stackintheinbox.com. Zach, what do you have for the good folks this week over at the Inbox?
Oh my gosh, we have a lot of long forms. Monday we talked about the was Traylon Burks Monday? Yeah, I guess Traylon Burks was Monday. Sorry, my days are all blending together, but Traylon Burks was Monday, talking about what to expect realistically from a wide receiver 4. Then of course yesterday was Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard, what to expect from them this year, kind of, the Bill Callahan effect, what the Bengals offense looks like, can they actually reach top 5? And of course, we talked a lot about that on the Football and Other F Words episode. And then tomorrow is more running backs, just running back week, apparently, over at stackintheinbox.com, because we're doing Sony does a big, massive film study on the 2023 seasons of Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard, and how that translates to the Bill Callahan / Brian Callahan run game in 2024.
And a couple of new drills yesterday and today for the running backs, today in particular, so we can dive into that a little bit later if you want to. I think tight end 1 conversation is only getting louder. Tight end 1, I will say this, if Josh Wiley had a war in practice on Thursday, maybe number 1 on the team. Possibly number 1 on the team on Thursday. So there's some players that I think that fans should note. It doesn't mean they're going to make the roster, but guys that are fighting for jobs that I think are worth talking about as well. So we'll get into that today. So lots going on. So make sure you check out Zach's stuff over there at Inbox, as well as all the other great shows. You got the Paul Karski podcast coming up here after we're done as well. So lots of stuff for you guys to consume. What is probably, not to depress everybody, but the last week of actual football action for, I don't know, 6 weeks.
Very long time.
We got SEC Media Days like July 16th or something like that. And that's, I guess, talking season. So I guess that's coming up around the corner. But otherwise, remember our great sponsors before we dive into our content about Will Levis and the offensive scheme, which is going to be a big part of today's show. Make sure you remember our sponsors, Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. My wife and I, we absolutely wish we would have had buildkg.com in our Rolodex. The Kingston Group, when we built this house, they actually came back for us and did a bunch of extra work for us on the house because they did a fantastic job for us. They'll take care of you, man, I promise you. So if you're doing a renovation, you need a new, you're adding a wing to a house, you're going to buy or sell a house, and you need to make sure it's in the right place to maximize your profits and your value. Just talk to the Kingston Group, buildkg.com, Nashville's locally owned custom home and remodeling firm. And of course, Sinkers Beverages. Search Sinkers Beverages this weekend. If you're out and about having a good time and you shouldn't be driving, just search Uber Eats, search Sinkers Beverages, and they will deliver the booze, Zach, right to your house.
Hey, they drive so you can drink.
There you go. Easton didn't quite nail it last week, but it was okay. It was all right.
Well, he didn't nail it at all. He at 0%. It was an F.
I was trying to take it easy. You know what is really satisfactory? Sinkers Beverages. Also, the gear is amazing too. So go check out the gear, Sinkers Beverages. I will, to your point about running backs, I will have a bunch of running back videos for you guys coming up as soon as we're done with the show. I had to leave practice early just to get here for the start of the show. That's how much I care about you folks out there. I'm not like some of these midday radio hosts that just leave their audience to go stand on the practice field. I would never do that to you. I'm here with Zach and with all of you not watching what really amounted to on Thursday as a very interesting situational drill where no one seemed to have a sense of urgency about anything. It was a very strange. It was a very strange.
Just a slow walkthrough.
It was
how PK I think described it like that.
Yeah, it's like, are they practicing? Is it a walk? Like they need to get the clocks to slow down. Then, like Austin and I were chatting about this. I was like, why would they run the 15-second drill? I'm off topic now. I'm very frustrated by how they organized a sequencing drill where they were practicing situational football, which is smart and it shouldn't be done in August. It should be done in June. But they weren't actually doing it at the pace with which they're supposed to be doing it. And so I was like, what's the purpose of this? I gotta anyway. Okay. We had enough radio bashing last episode from Tim. Yeah, that's a good point. We don't need to do that again this episode. All right.
100% correct.
Sinkers Beverages.
I would expect that I would expect that weak take from an Auburn fan.
War Eagle, baby. War Eagle. Clearly, Brian Callahan's inexperience as a head coach is showing, says Stoney. And there's that snark we know and love on the show. We do appreciate it. I'm not putting that on the screen, Stoney.
JC Latham has slid into the press conference to do your guys' job for you. And he said that he asked Brian Callahan if he'd ever think about utilizing the size and speed of his tackle, JC Latham, in a receiving situation.
And what was his answer?
I don't know. I'm listening to you. I can't listen to it.
Oh, come on. Listening to me is a loose term. Let's be honest. Okay. Will Levis, I think quarterbacks, here's my major 10,000-foot takeaway from the quarterbacks these 3 days. Defense wins, quarterbacks struggled. And I think there were some drills in which some guys were better. Today, for example, in the middle of the field on 7-on-7, Mason Rudolph had a pretty good day. I think the scheme had better days and worse days, which I find really interesting, especially in the red zone situation. But I think Levis was a bit late on a lot of things. He struggled in all three phases. He struggled in the bubble on Tuesday. He struggled in red zone in a big way. And he struggled today in the middle of the field. A lot of that, in my opinion, was holding onto the football too long, which you could see last year was a bit of a problem at times. Not always his fault. Some of it was rookie. Some of it was Hopkins being the only weapon. Some of it was scheme. Some of it was offensive line. We can keep going. But you can't hold on to the football in practice. Like, you got to let it rip, and you got to take your chances, and you got to see the right things. And he was late seeing open receivers in the bubble on Tuesday. He was really hesitant and did not pull the trigger much at all in the red zone drill. In fact, one time, I think he threw the ball on time and on rhythm in 9 reps. And then today, he was late seeing open receivers, open Chig down the seam, Leighton behind him. Wiley, great catch in the corner route, Leighton behind him. Throw to, I can't remember who it was on the near sideline, Leighton behind him. He's got to process faster. And Easton and I were talking, and I said, Easton, he said, well, how would I ask a question about the process? I said, just ask him ask Brian Callahan, how do you feel about Will Levis's processing? How has it developed since you started working with him? And he said today he was definitely late on a few throws. He's definitely got to be a little bit more in rhythm and on time. I think that's the one thing. The biggest takeaway is the processing's not there yet for Will Levis.
Yeah, to me, this is the growing pains of installing a new offense for all 3 of these quarterbacks, including Mason Rudolph, who was in more of a Todd Downing-like situation for these last few years at the Steelers under Matt Canada. All 3 of these quarterbacks are adjusting to a new system, so I'm not surprised that there are growing pains coming from all 3 of these quarterbacks in different ways in different situations. So to me, it's like, it's not really time, and I'm not saying you are, but just in general for fans who may hear this or may read that a ball ended up in a lake after a weird bounce, it's not time to panic for anything, because what we know is that Will Levis has talked about, Will Levis kind of talked about in a sense that after training camp, he has this plan laid out. He's got a quarterback coach, which I do not remember the name of, who is going to get with, I guess, the coaches here and then figure out a plan. And they're all going to come together and figure out what he needs to work on between now and training camp. And to me, this is for every player, the time between now and training camp is the most important time for younger players learning a new system, or rookies just entering in the league. This is the put up or shut up time. So to me, I'm not too concerned with Will Levis's situation right now, because also Brian Callahan, when Easton asked that question, he said, this is the last question that we actually heard before we came on the air. He said that he's got to bank reps, and he has not banked enough reps on these particular plays that you are seeing in a new system enough to get the timing down and be at ease with the timing. Now, that's what he's obviously has to work on between now and training camp. Like, that is the number one thing, because your timing comes down with your accuracy, right? Like, you're talking about all these guys running open. If he would have had his timing down, there would have been a lot more completed passes there. So the timing is tied to the accuracy. So you really got to start getting more comfortable in banking reps with the wide receivers, which he is going to do. The wide receivers are going to have like a little summit with Will Levis. So they're going to be banking some reps in the summer before training camp. And then when you come into training camp, you're still going to see these issues, but you want to see less amount of these issues. You want to see tangible progress. If we are in the middle of July or whenever it's going to start, because the first game is August 10th. So it's coming up sooner, 4 or 5 weeks away. Whenever training camp starts, that's when you got to figure out, are we seeing enough progress from Will Levis? Because if you're not going to see progress from Will Levis in training camp, it's going to be really hard for him to have progress at the beginning of the season.
So a couple things here. There's a processing question, which is you made the right read. You were a touch late on it and maybe a little outside or something. And that stuff I think that's correctable. And we'll get to the scheme part of this, which I think is actually a really big part of important to talk about. In the red zone on Wednesday, that is a really tough drill for the offenses. Like, just in general, it's 7-on-7 in the red zone. You start on the 20, you kind of work your way up. You do some snaps at the 10, you do some snaps at the 5, you do some snaps at the 8. Like, when the linebackers have no fear of the running game and you don't have to, you are dropping into pass coverage. And the field gets squeezed. It is automatically supposed to be harder on the offense. So, like, that is number one to think about. I think the takeaway, to your point, it's June, it's install. Let's not overreact to anything. I think the question is the problem is it's the same two things, all three drills for Will Levis. I think is the one thing where it's like, okay, let's pay attention to that. Let's not lose our mind. Mason Rudolph was the best, I think, in almost every drill. In all of the 7-on-7 drills, I think Rudolph was the best. I think it is very clear that Malik Willis is the worst, and it was even worse today than it was on Tuesday and Wednesday. And you want to get more reps for Will Levis, maybe not split it 3 ways. Just one way to do that. I don't know what purpose Malik Willis serves this team. So I'm not trying to be rude. He's a great guy. I think I've seen everything I need to see about him. Let's go to the red zone here.
We kind of saw that his first year. I mean, let's just be honest. We got to call a spade when it comes down to Malik Willis. And at the end of the day, I mean, Jim Wyatt wasted a question on what do you expect the splits to be between Mason Rudolph and Malik Willis through training camp? Like, who gives a shit? No, we all know that Mason Rudolph is the backup quarterback. We know Malik Willis is likely. At one point, I thought that Malik Willis may be able to stick around on the for the quarterback three, deal. It's not going to happen. Let's just be honest. And I changed my mind quickly on that when making when I'm, constantly editing my, 53, I'm like, there's no way Malik Willis is making this team.
They have too many needs at depth places everywhere else that they need to keep another person on, in my opinion. And that's even before campus started. So that's my opinion. All right. So the thing about Levis. So on Tuesday, Nick Westbrook-Creen, so some of this even with Willis is bad decision or bad throws. There are some really positive things to be taken because the scheme got guys open on Tuesday and Thursday. It was not as good on Wednesday in the red zone drill. But on Tuesday, Nick Westbrook-Creen breaks wide open on a corner route. He is wide open. Levis sees it a little late. The ball is delivered pretty accurately, but Roger McCreary gets up and knocks it down. That's because Levis saw it just a half second too late and delivered it a half second too late. Same thing happened today. They were completed, but the same thing happened. Josh Wiley, corner route. He sees it a second late, throws it a little inside, doesn't keep Wiley running on his feet where he should have. Wiley actually makes a great adjustment catch, turns back to the inside, and is really good. Chig on the seam route, he connects. It's a completed pass, but it's late, and he's wide open. You got to hit him faster, right? It needs to be a beat faster. Then there's a red zone play that was the Jack Gibbons interception. It was the Jack Gibbons interception. And the coaching staff, the second Levis dropped back to pass, you could hear them yelling, Hopkins, Hopkins, Hopkins. Hopkins was one-on-one, wide open, beat his man on a little, you run that sort of like come back to the pylon or whatever. Like, he would have been open. That was the throw he should have made. So that was a misread, which is different than I saw the right read and I was a little late. So that was one where, and then Hopkins comes back and they're like, good route, dude. That's a perfect route. Like, it wasn't Hopkins. It was the quarterback who missed him and didn't even throw it, ends up as an interception. So I think it's just it's nothing to worry about. It's nothing to get super upset about, or, we can't yell about June, but it's all we have to go on. And sure, it could be positive for the defense. The secondary looks better. We know the corners are better, but like, this is not up against Snead and Awuzie. This is up against Trey Avery and, Jarvis Brownlee got a lot of reps today. So I think it's worth noting. I think it's one of the biggest issues is going to be Levis's processing. The good news today, over all the 3 days, though, Zach, was the scheme was at its best today. The scheme got dudes open for all three quarterbacks. That, like, whether it was Jaquan Jackson wide open back-to-back plays on corner routes and Malik Willis threw the ball like to another country. Like, I don't know, but Jackson was wide open on 2 straight plays. Willis missed him. 3 or 4 different throws for Levis. Guys were wide open. Chig, Wiley, NWI. I mean, guys are open on today's drill.
But who's out there on defense in these drills where people are open? Is it Cheeto and McCreary? Is it the ones or the twos? I mean, I guess that's...
Well, it's the ones against Levis and the ones. So but now, again, minus Snead and Awuzie, right? So it's hard to know. But a lot of it, like, I think, and this might actually, I hadn't thought about this, but this might actually be why they were throwing the ball to Chig and to Wiley a lot, was because they know they've got Hooker, they've got Molden, they've got McCreary. They've kind of got more of a starting group in the middle. So maybe that's why they're kind of going one-on-one in the middle a little bit more. And we'll get to some of the younger guys that are playing well. But, like, the scheme got Chig open today, got Wiley open today. It got NWI open today, got Tajay Spears open today on an interesting play. It got guys open for Mason Rudolph, and it got guys wide open for Malik Willis. And it was not as good on Wednesday in the red zone, where, you know how you run a play in the red zone, it's like it just hits. And you're like, oh, that guy was open. And the reason it was open was because it was a brilliant scheme. That happened one time in 9 reps for Will Levis. He read it right. He made the right throw. Tyler Boyd touchdown over the middle. But other than that, the scheme didn't get anybody open in the red zone for Will Levis. Today, it was much, much better. And that was, I think, the better part of today, and maybe the best part of all 3 days, is that the scheme largely got guys open on 2 of the 3 days. And I like that. I think that was good to watch.
Well, I think this is a good question from Ed Henry. Is this install everything, or will it be altered to what Levis does best? Assume he had some input in this install. And yes, I mean, he's had input, and what you are seeing installed is what the Titans offensive collective, I guess you could say, I'm sure Nick Holtz had input, Brian Callahan, Bill Callahan, Bo Hardigree, I'm sure all had input as much as Will Levis does. But at the end of the day, this is the offense that they are installing that thinks works best for Will Levis. So it's now time that we put the onus on the quarterback to step up into the system. Because this system, this coach, this system has talked all year, all offseason, I guess I should say, for the last couple of months, that the Tennessee Titans, he wants to work with Will Levis. He really loves Will Levis's traits. This offense is going to be built around Will Levis, what he can do best, but he's going to have to grow. So now the onus is on the quarterback. Like, this is not a situation where you have Vince Young trying to run an offense that doesn't suit him. So this is not the Marcus and Ken Wisenhunt, thing. Right. This is a guy that you trust to come in and build a system around Will Levis, and he has said so. So now, and I'm kind of probably misconstruing what Ed is ultimately meaning, but what I'm saying is that this system is for Will Levis. Quarterbacks, it's a quarterback-friendly system. Brian Callahan is a quarterback whisperer. He's worked with many different quarterbacks. He's put together an offensive talent around Will Levis. He has built an offensive system around Will Levis's strengths. Now it's time for Will Levis to take the necessary steps to fulfill his manifest destiny, if you will, that he has to be the guy. And to be the guy, you can't dumb it down, right? You can't just run a Tim Tebow-like offense because you have Tim Tebow. If you want to be the guy, you have to run a big boy offense. And this big boy offense is tailored to Will Levis. He's just going to have to develop stuff that he has not been maybe asked to develop before. He's going to have to improve aspects of his game that maybe he's not been able to improve because of bad offensive line play, bad pass catchers. It's up to Will Levis now. This is I just keep coming back to it. It's just a year where you should be able to figure out what Will Levis is this year. Whether that's good or bad, you just can. I just don't see any reason not to. And that's just how the NFL works nowadays. The NFL works. It's what have you done for me lately? And the leash players, coaches, GMs have nowadays is much, much shorter than it is for, than it was during the Jeff Fisher era.
Yeah, there were. I agree that eventually seeing the field, the processing, the decision making, the accuracy, the timing, all of that is on the quarterback. And I don't think that what Brian Callahan is doing is like too complicated for Will Levis or doesn't fit Will Levis. Like I don't think any of that stuff. I just think Levis, no matter what system he's running, this is going to have to be a part of the game that he works on. It just is. I mean, he wasn't a 68% completion guy in college. He never has been, and he's never run a system like this. So I just think he's got to – I think last year when you look at the film and you study what he is, a lot of the problems, which are not all on him, we know what the struggles were of the offense. But some of those things are probably going to be things that Brian Callahan is working out of his game, which is holding onto the ball a touch too long. Like the red zone drill – Will Levis probably took 6 sacks, and you just can't you got to throw the ball. It's practice. Like throw the ball, dude. Like you can't sit back. It serves you no purpose. It doesn't help the defensive players.
And also, can't you throw the ball? The thing is, this is without pads. So just throw the ball.
Just throw the football.
That to me, and that's something I screamed, at Malik Willis. I've screamed it at Ryan Tannehill. I've screamed it at Will Levis all these last 2 years. Just throw the fucking ball. Because and granted, this offensive line will technically be better than maybe he's just an 11-on-11 guy, for example. Maybe that's just what Will Levis is. He's an 11-on-11 guy. But at the end of the day, this offensive line will be better than last year. But there are sacks and pressures that he created last year that he's created since college. You have to break these bad habits. That's been the thing that holds him back the most, has been his accuracy and his decision-making, which involves decision-making of how quick to throw the ball. To me, those two things encompass everything that we have talked about that have been issues, that have always been issues, and those are the things that prevent Will Levis from being a multi-year starter or prevent him from being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, that's why a lot of people are like, I have all this faith that, I don't see any way that, Will Levis is a bust this year. I think he's going to be great. Listen, it is 50-50 with a quarterback, and specifically this quarterback in his situation. He's been given all the tools to do it. It does not mean that he can actually go out there and do it on Sundays. And if he can't do it on Sundays at 1 p.m., then he's probably not going to be able to do it next year. And to me, it's like you look at it and you go, he has just as much a chance to be ass as he does to be elite, in my opinion. That's just where it's at. Now, truth will be somewhere in the middle.
Right.
That's how you're talking about 20% ass, 20% elite, and probably 40% good and 10% just average, something like that, all those
which is why there's almost like a 100% chance that we figure out that he's like the 13th best quarterback in the league. So here
I'll fine in the NFL today, because Tua's going to get paid a lot of money for being probably the 15th best quarterback in the league.
I think Tua is a much better thrower of the football than Will Levis, but that's not.
I definitely agree, but that's not the discussion. I was just talking about top 15.
So I'll read you sort of the nine different plays in the red zone as much detail as I can. But before we do, if you want to jump into the comments, we will absolutely see them and read them and post them. If you are watching on YouTube, give us a subscription and share the show. We really appreciate that. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, please give us a retweet or a share. We would appreciate that as well. So even the ones where he made throws, they were after 5 or 6 seconds of just walking around, not throwing the football, scrambling around, not throwing the football. So the one that bounced into the lake, which was like back line of the end zone, after roaming around for 4 seconds, which would have been a sack, it wasn't really his fault that it bounced into the lake. It just hit the ground it was like a right hash throw to the back left pile. You know what I mean? Like it was just sort of, it was all like just weird physics that the ball bounced into the lake. It's just funny because I've never seen that happen where it bounced over the fence and into the lake. But that's a coverage sack. That would have been a sack. And ultimately, the pass breakup from Hooker would have been a sack. He ran out of bounds short of the goal line. That's either a sack or no gain. No throw on 2 other plays, which you call coverage sacks. And then the last one, where again he rolls around, it's a really nice throw to Nick Westbrook-Akine in the back of the end zone, out of the back of the end zone. He makes a great catch, but it's a no. That wouldn't have been a throw. It was a sack. So 6 sacks out of 9. Only 3 times did he actually throw the ball in rhythm, and it's not a big deal. It's June. It's a tough drill. But at the end of the day, nobody learns anything. The defense, the receivers, the quarterback, if you don't pull the trigger on it. Take the interception and the heat from the media afterward. I'd rather see 3 interceptions but throwing the ball on rhythm. And this was Vrabel to Willis last year, right? And the year before. Just throw the football. So, again, just something to watch, not worth overreacting to. He was better on Tuesday, and he was better on today as well. But the scheme got one guy open, one play open, where it was like boom, 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 boom. Scheme worked, touchdown, great read, good throw. It was 1 out of 9. Rudolph was a little bit better. I think he threw 2 touchdowns. And then, honestly, I'm not sure Willis ran a drill this week that was productive. It was not pretty. And but the scheme, the big positive
third
takeaway.
Year in a row, baby. Malik Willis, 3rd year in a row.
The big positive takeaway from the quarterbacks for me for the week is that the scheme, while it wasn't great in a very difficult drill in the red zone, the scheme got people open on Tuesday and Thursday in 7-on-7. So there you go. Got a cough. I apologize.
Listen,
all right.
I've been struggling with that for like 2 weeks.
Okay. I promised you guys I was going to stare at the pass rushers. I even tweeted a picture of a video of Khalid Duke for Stoney there on the Twitter.
Was he strictly edge? I think that was the big question that we both had. Was he strictly edge?
He was absolutely in the edge group for the entirety of the mix. Okay. He was with Arden Key and Harold Landry, and they didn't do a lot on Wednesday and Thursday. Like you couldn't see a lot of the groups from where we were, but we were real up close on the pass rushers on Tuesday in the bubble. And I'll say this: I think Landry and Key, like they were absolutely fired up, vocal, a lot of back and forth, but in a really good spirited way. That's a positive thing for them, getting people hyped up. So I'll just give you my one takeaway, and then you can ask questions and we can go back and forth. But on a factual basis, on just one Tuesday practice in the middle of June, I've cleared my throat literally now on this. The most violent, the most physical, the guy going the hardest, and the guy getting the most reaction from the veterans in the group. The guy that was getting people hyped. Every rep, Arden Key and Harold Landry yelling and jumping up and down and celebrating this guy was Thomas Rush. His body is different this year. I asked a few people, I said, is this true? He's bigger and leaner this year than he was last year. And he tosses around the sleds and the equipment in a way that makes Rashad Weaver look real soft. And that is just I'm not saying he makes the team. I'm not saying he's an impact player. Those are the 2 guys coming off the bench as the pass rushers in 2s, right? If your starters are Key and Landry, the next guys are Weaver and Rush coming off the bench. And if you're comparing those 2, Thomas Rush looks like a far better football player. But that was just one drill.
This is the first time I've realized that Thomas Rush is a white dude. I just because I'm looking up his stats. I'm like, whoa, I was not expecting that.
He and
off hair and all this kind of stuff.
It means absolutely nothing for the final 53, or that if he makes the team. I have no idea. In fact, I might, if you're gambling, you might say he doesn't. But if you're telling me like who looks more powerful, more aggressive, and has violent hands at the point of attack, Rashad Weaver just doesn't look nearly as powerful and as strong and as violent as Thomas Rush does. And if you practice the way you play, one guy, and I even have video of Rashad Weaver like not finishing a drill that I posted. So like if you're looking at those two guys and you're the coaching staff looking at the film, I don't know how you don't lean Rush over Weaver in that situation. At least just on the one day. So yeah, exactly.
That would be a big upset. As far as like when you were talking about final 53s, if he was to make it or be ahead of him on the depth chart. I want to ask you this. So was I right all along about Caleb Murphy? Is there just nothing there? Because we haven't heard shit about Caleb Murphy this entire offseason after everybody touted the great preseason god of Caleb Murphy last year and how, hey, at Fenris State or Ferris State University Community College, he got 37,000 sacks in one season against, the worst football players imaginable and, all this stuff. So I just want to make sure.
I mean,
I was right about Caleb Murphy, wasn't I?
I did not take a single note about number 42 this week.
Yeah. It seems like nobody has. It's almost like you kind of forget that Caleb Murphy's on the team. He's
53, which is Duke. He's interesting. But 48 Rush is the guy that stood out. 92, which is Jalen Harrell, the rookie out of Michigan. He is interesting. I would put him sort of battling in that third role. But no, Caleb Murphy, there's like 5 or 6 guys that are battling for like the third tier. And I mean, honestly, there's not a lot of depth at a lot of positions on this team. there's just not. Safety, linebacker, outside pass rusher, tight end, just not a lot of depth. So I don't know what that means for Duke and Rush and Murphy and Harrell. I don't know. I could see him making the team though. His body looks different, and he had a very good week of practice. So that's all. It doesn't mean anything for the future, but it's just
we haven't really heard a lot about Jalen Harrell, so it sounds like he's living up to the 6th round pick expectation. I would assume maybe he's getting some special run on special teams. It's going to be an interesting.
You're gonna have to beat out Traylon Burks though for those special teams reps.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting edge group because maybe they sign someone between now and training camp because I do expect a safety to be signed through between now and then. Maybe they sign someone to bring in, but it'll be pretty interesting to see how the rotation actually works because, I mean, obviously the big thing about this whole staff has been, well, so-and-so's been great, but we'll see what happens when the pads come on. We'll see when the pads come on. We'll see when the pads come on.
Yep.
And at this point, it's hard to take anything away until we see when the pads come on, right? Like, it's really hard to have a real big takeaway from this edge group other than, looks great in shorts and shirts, and his body type has changed, and he's hitting his sleds differently than someone else. Or the same, goes for the offensive line. They're doing the drills better or faster or whatever. But once the pads come on, it's going to be a little bit different. And I think that's why you see guys like Thomas Rush or Caleb Murphy take a step back, but you see a guy like Rashad Weaver take a step up because of, just pedigree. I guess maybe it comes down to just pedigree of the player itself and the experience that Rashad Weaver has in the pros. But it will be interesting to see after Rashad Weaver, what does that room look like? How many do they carry? Who do they carry? Because you still have Jalen Harrell that nobody's really talked about, Khalid Duke, Thomas Rush, Caleb Murphy, sort of. I mean, you have guys back there. It really feels like edge and safety are going to be 2 positions that between now and training camp that they're going to have some workouts, bring some guys in, and eventually sign 2 guys.
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, if you're just going strictly like 1 to 7 or whatever, right? Just in order, it's Harold Landry 1, Arden Key 2. I would probably go with Rashad Weaver 3. But after that, I don't know why it wouldn't be Thomas Rush 4. Like, honestly.
Right. And that's why I kind of feel like really the best thing to happen is to sign. I'm still here for Carl Lawson. sign Carl Lawson, and listen, Carl Lawson either pushes Arden Key and Rashad Weaver down or pushes Rashad Weaver down. Either way, your edge rotation looks a ton better with a guy like Carl Lawson.
Because
And I think
honestly,
eventually that's what's going to happen. And I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not sourced or anything, but I just have this feeling that some edge guy's going to come in and either push both Arden Rashad Weaver down or just Rashad Weaver.
I think that's possible. Because honestly, I would probably have Caleb Murphy at 5, Jalen Harrell 6 is probably the order. If I was just like randomly guessing one, like not based on left, right, or whatever. And Noir says, what about tight end? We'll get to that in just a second. So yeah, I mean, look, you either need Thomas Rush to be very good, or you need to sign someone else, or Rashad Weaver has to really step up as well, because he just doesn't look as like, he looks more the part, but he does not look nearly as physical and as violent the way Rush does. So that's that tight end. I think Josh Whyle is making himself a really big part of the offense. Now, does that mean he's worthy of being drafted by fantasy team owners? No, I don't think so. But is he a starting player on this team? Can he be productive? Can he do what Brian Callahan needs out of his tight end if he's going to split reps between Chig and Josh Whyle? I think absolutely. I think the talk of Josh Whyle being the more versatile and more overall well-rounded tight end, he's a bigger target on these corner routes and down the seams in the red zone. I think absolutely. I think they have 2 solid tight ends. Nick Vanette's probably going to be number 3 on the team. And I'm more comfortable with Josh Whyle than I expected at this stage of the summer. So I think he had a great day of practice on Thursday for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of look at it, you're talking about if you're a team that is forced, if you're in a fantasy league that's forced to have the ridiculous mandatory tight end, you definitely do not want to draft him. But he is a guy that could be tight end 15 or 16. I mean, that's not that hard. It's not that hard to be a good tight end if you are forced to have one, because it's fairly easy. But I think this kind of goes back to something about last summer about, when Will Levis was out there taking second team reps or splitting second team reps with Malik Willis, who was he throwing to? Josh Whyle.
Mm-hmm.
Who does he golf with? Josh Whyle. Who does he obviously have a massive connection with on and off the field? Because when Josh Whyle stepped on the field while Will Levis was still out there, he was targeting Josh Whyle, not Chig Okonkwo. It just goes to the fact that when we have talked about Josh Whyle maybe pushing for tight end 1, and we talked about Football and Other Efforts a couple weeks ago that he was going to, the big take brewing was that Josh Whyle will end up being tight end 1. Just looking good, better and better each and every day. Now, I will say this. I don't know, Josh Whyle and Brock Bowers, those are 2 guys that just do not look as big as they do when they have pads on. Like when they're out in getting interviewed, in their just, civilian clothes, they just don't look like tight ends. They look like old, insurance brokers.
Well, isn't Whyle like 2 inches taller too? Like I think he's
I mean, he just doesn't look at when they interviewed him, I think it was 2 days ago. He was in the part of the media scrum, if I'm not mistaken. Whenever he was last part of the media scrum, it's just you're looking at him and you go, I'm pretty sure that dude should sign me up for some home mortgage premiums. Like, I'm pretty sure that guy handed me a brochure.
He's listed at 6'7", 248. I would say he's like.
It just does not seem like it, right? Like,
yeah.
In pads, he looks like it. In pads, he looks like it. It's just funny how that works. But
I think it's going to be very well. Because I want you to go on this for a little bit, because I think Chig and Whyle complement each other very well. So I don't think, like Pollard and Spears, I don't think you need to have TE1, tight end 2 designations. It's tight end 1A and tight end 1B, depending on what the formation calls for and depending on what the play calls for. If you are talking about, again, there's certain things that a larger, bigger-bodied player are going to do better. And I think Chig is probably better at breaking tackles in the open field. Like there's different strengths and weaknesses, but I think they are very complementary. And one of the things that this team, and this is an observation I had with another media member, we were chatting about who's going to be the third running back. And it's like, well, Haskins, it might be Haskins because he does something different than the other 2 guys. And there's not a lot of difference on this roster between, other than the wide receiver position where they all sort of have different skills, right? And they're kind of slotted into different roles. there's not a lot of difference between a lot of guys and their backups. And sometimes that's a really good thing. You want them to be able to step right in and you don't have to change anything. Sometimes you want it to be different. You want your running back to be able to, you want a different player that can do a different thing. Callahan talked about sometimes you need that back to go downhill or whatever. So I think having two tight ends that are very different skill-wise to be your start, like you can pick which play is tight end 1 and which play is tight end 2. And I think that's a nice, it doesn't mean that either of them are going to be like elite players that you need to like, write home about, but I think they're solid. And I think Wiley's better than people think. And I think you're dead on about the connection with Levis. I think there's absolutely something there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the running backs.
Chig needs to be used kind of like a, oh man, who would be a good, I guess Travis Kelce would be the, or maybe a Sam Laporta or a Dalton Kincaid. Not necessarily. Chig's best trait is that he's not an inline backer. He is goes up the seam, gets open because he's more athletic than, linebackers. He can catch the ball. He can get yards after the catch. Wiley can do all that, but he can also block. So, like, to me, it's like you're looking. This is a terror. Let's see. Let me look at my tight end list here. You're looking at the difference between a Cole Kmet and Josh Wiley and I would say, I guess, a Dalton Kincaid, I think is a good, or Trey McBride, maybe.
I think Trey McBride's a good one.
Yeah, for Chig. I think that's what you're looking at, is that you're looking at two guys that aren't considered the elite of the elite tight ends. Yeah, Mike Gesicki. That's a good comp for Chig. You're looking at Mike Gesicki and Cole Kmet out there. You're looking at a Cole Kmet who can do the jump ball, who could be the red zone guy, who can also block, who never really has to come off the field, who is the quarterback's best friend. Then you're looking at Mike Gesicki, who's just hopefully a better Mike Gesicki. Maybe you're looking at a Isaiah Likely would be maybe a good one for Chig as well, because he's a guy that doesn't really block, but he's a guy that's used in pass catching situations, but doesn't get a lot of snaps.
Very different body type, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they're both athletic. I mean, Isaiah Likely is maybe skinnier, but they're both athletic guys. But at the end of the day, you're not looking at a guy in Chig that's going to be used a lot in blocking. So Eldon Shrike 113 asks who gets the most even snap split, Chig, Wiley, or Pollard and Spears. I think closer to even snaps is going to be Pollard and Spears. I think Chig's not. If you were to label the pass catching snap counts, I would go like your top 4 to me are going to be DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, and Calvin Ridley in some order. And then you're going to have probably Josh Wiley behind them as far as offensive snap counts. Then you're going to have the running backs behind them. And then you're probably going to have Chig Okonkwo. Then you're going to get to Treylon Burks. Like, I think that's how it's going to kind of roll with this rotation and barring an injury.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Chig, I think, has got like these, you can be more like Jonnu Smith trick playish with Chig, I think. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Josh, it's just more of a traditional tight end role. And again, I think they're nice complementary pieces. I do think I am interested. Jabari Small had a really good practice today. Got a lot of praise from the coaches. Dylan Johnson,
I wouldn't worry about him.
Dylan Johnson looks a little stiff. Julius Chestnut got some hard coaching today. I kind of am back around on like Haskins might be the one guy that like does the slashing straight line downhill between the tackles kind of thing, even though he's not like elite at that.
If they're looking for the guy that will lose you 2 yards, Son Haskins.
I just don't know. I'm looking at the other guys though, and it feels like they're all the same as Spears and Pollard. So I don't know. It's really interesting to look at that group. All right. Where are we headed to next? You want to talk offensive line at all? Where do you want to go? Kicking game was brutal.
I think we all know about the offensive line at this point. I would say that I think the guy, and he's someone that both me and Stoney have highlighted, and we talked about it on here as well, but I think Gabe Jeudy-Lawley's making this team. And the thing that really put Gabe Jeudy-Lawley on my radar was the fact that when the local pro day was, they spent tons of time with him at the local pro day. It was probably the guy that they spent the most time with at the local pro day, maybe besides Cole Spencer there. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, Okay, there's some special teams value. They obviously tried him at punt returner and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I mean, TD's been talking about it, since last week. You've mentioned it. You've talked. PK has talked about him. And his name has been brought up a lot, almost more than Cheeto, right? I mean, like we've heard more about Gabe Judy-Lally than we've heard about Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and Cheeto so far. He's probably outside of Caleb Farley, the most talked about cornerback that has seen the practice field. I think he's making this team, and I think he's a guy that probably really fits that dog in him. The disciplined asshole with grit. He fits that Denard Wilson mold. There was Stoney has a massive a few clips on that he probably needs to retweet, more, but where he shows that he's just a dog. He's just a dude, and he will fight you. He's physical, and he's got the size, the measurables that you're looking for. And he's been running with D-Hop. He's been running up against, Treylon Burks, knocking down passes from almost every wide receiver at least once. I think Gabe Judy's going to make it, and I think Gabe Judy may be playing a lot more significant for his depth chart position. He'll be playing significant snaps. I guess that would be the best way to put it.
So, and I've got a list of guys that I think are either on the wrong side, or maybe just on the right side of the cut line, right? Like Thomas Rush for me is in that group. Like he's in the 10 players on the plus side and the 10 players on the minus side of the final 53. And guys that I have been impressed with in that group, Thomas Rush is one of them. Both Jaquan Jackson and Jarvis Brownlee, obviously drafted, so maybe valued a little bit higher by the staff. Those two guys, I think, really, really look the part of rosterable players. For sure, and contributors. They're both very savvy dudes. All the scouting reports are accurate on the high level, sort of like football IQ and smarts and being in the right place at the right time. But Gabe Judy-Lally on Tuesday, one of the most impressive plays of all 3 days of practice, he's lined up basically with the ones on DeAndre Hopkins in man-to-man coverage, and they throw a back shoulder fade in man-to-man coverage, and he is with him the entire time. Like he's in his hip pocket, perfect technique. Hopkins turns to look for the ball. He turns and looks for the ball. Hopkins goes up with his hands. He attacks the hands, high points the football, knocks it away. So he does and the reason that's an impressive rep is because Hopkins is going to do everything perfect. Like Hopkins is going to do everything perfectly. There's nothing he's done wrong on that route. So you're going to have to play the ball the way it's coached from a technique standpoint to win that rep. And he won that rep in a big way. And a lot of people on the sideline got, from a player standpoint, got real excited about it. So he's been one of Thomas Rush and Gabe Judy-Lally are two that I would circle this week and say, if you guys were like 60th on the list or 70th on the list, then now you're closer to 53. I think from this week, I think they've put a lot of good tape on they put a lot of good things on tape this week. Those two guys, I think. And then I would say, and we can get to Jackson and Brownlee, but I think both those guys have done a lot of good things today too, this week. So
I would look at, Gabe Judy, when he played man in University of Tennessee, he was really, really good. He was better than his teammate Kamal Hayden as far as the stats dictate. So I would assume that he transitions very well to this new system and has taken it on fairly easily. Probably enjoys it more too. And I think maybe, I guess PK, I believe is Paul Karski, had something with Cheeto. And of course, I have not listened to it, but he did. The caption was, Cheeto seems very surprised by how much talk there has been about previous Titans defenses playing so much off zone coverage, like off the man so far back. He's been very shocked by it. So, I mean, I'm very happy.
Must not have watched too many Titans games last year.
Must not have. He's watching probably the offense, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Anything, but it's been really nice to see that playing off press is not playing off coverage is not an option.
I agree.
I'm thoroughly enjoying that. Who are guys that are on the wrong side of that line? Because I do want to talk about linebackers, and we'll close on that. But who are the guys that you have listed? Because you said you have a list of guys that are just on the right side and just on the wrong side. we've talked about Malik Willis, but maybe who's someone else that's just on the wrong side.
Well, so Stoney said,
or has a lot of ground to make up. Maybe.
Yeah, he said Stoney says Gabe Judy-Lally played a lot off at UT. He's transitioning well to playing more press that Wilson wants. ? And that rep against DeAndre Hopkins was all rolled up. He was rolled up right in his grill on press. So he's been very good in that situation. All right, I'm gonna have to think about that because I
thought you had a list. So if you don't have a list, we'll move on and talk about
it's all like the list of guys that I feel positive about. It's more of like a group, like so Matthew Jackson, for example, a couple of really bad plays today, like just like completely broken coverage, torched on one. And then gave up and dropped an interception on another, and like just not a good day for him. Mike Brown did not have a great day today. Mike Brown might be above the line just because based on the depth chart. But this is the thing. Like I look at the linebackers and I'm like Gibbons and Campbell and all these guys. Like Garrett Wallow was in there as like the play caller for a while this week. So I think there's a lot of competition at that position, and it's where there's no depth that you're going. Who's going to make the team? Somebody has to make the team at middle linebacker and at safety, and they don't have a lot of guys that are putting in good reps. A guy, to your point, that I have not noticed at all that you want to see make plays, like Eric Garrett type of player. Haven't thought about him, haven't mentioned him, haven't seen him do anything. So like that's a guy that if you get lost in the shuffle, you don't make the team, right? They clearly have Trey Avery pretty high on the depth chart. I'll just say that.
Okay, they do. Okay,
I think so. I mean, he's basically been your number one corner the entire week. So
interesting. That's interesting.
I mean, just like he's out there a lot. And we can get to the rotation at linebacker if you want to, because that's really fascinating to me. But I think it's guys that you sort of need to see make plays. And if I haven't mentioned you, then you haven't made a lot of plays, in which case you're in trouble from a roster standpoint. So otherwise,
let's talk about this linebacking, because you sent the text and I'll pull it up real quick. You said, let's see, rotation of Gray and Murray and Williams. Now, does this mean that they are rotating in and out with as the weak side linebacker, I guess you would say, or are they rotating? Just like, what does that really mean? Like the rotation of Gray, Murray, and Williams.
So what I'm finding interesting is when Denard Wilson wants to put guys out there is interesting to me, because with a guy like Murray, I think the common sense sort of like logic is that he doesn't need to like physically get ready for the game, because he's been around for a couple of years. Whereas a player like Cedric Gray, if he's not out there and getting a lot of reps, which he does not, then it's because maybe he's next to you on the sideline and he's not ready, because you would think he would need a lot of reps, but he's not the one that's out there getting a lot of reps when it's not, because it has not really been what I would think is the starting group. I mean, it's a lot of Gibbons and Chance Campbell and Otis Reese and Garrett Wallow. Like those are the guys that they're rotating in these team drills. Now that could be one thing to say, we need to see what we don't know about, right? Like we need to put you out there. We need to challenge you guys. We know what Kenneth Murray is. We went and signed him. He may not be elite, but we know what he is, right? We know what he can do. He is what he is. The other guys. So I'm fascinated by, like, Williams is getting a lot more reps than Gray, for example. He just is. He's in there on red zone. He's in there on 7-on-7. He's just in there more. And you're going, all right, like, is this because they want to have Gray sit back and watch? Or isn't that the best way to, I don't know. I'm sure they have a strategy for why they're rotating the guys the way they are in June. I just would like to, I'm curious as to what their strategy is, because there's got to be a reason why. So like Garrett Wallow's out there like calling plays for a lot of these sessions. And I'm going, okay, well, either you really like him or you don't like him and you need to see what you've got in him and you already trust Gray and Murray, or, does that make sense? Like,
right. You just don't know what the strategy actually is. Because we kind of talked about it there. I hear Chance Campbell's name a lot, and we know that certain players are making this team, and maybe this is a tryout for other players, as they head into the long off season, decide, well, who are we carrying into training camp? Who do we need to go get? What position do we need to go get? So maybe I'm with you. maybe it is just likely that they are going through these players and giving these players considerable time because they know what they have in Gray. They know that they're keeping Williams. They know, likely that they're keeping Otis Reese, which that's a name that you haven't really heard a lot from is Otis Reese. I mean, at the end of the day, what has he looked like on this team? That's a question I have.
I think I would put Otis Reese and Trey Avery in the exact same category.
Okay.
That
they're making the team.
Yeah, like they are very clearly above the cut line, but at the bottom of the list of their position. But it is clear that the team trusts both of them because they are both on the field a lot, and fairly early, right? I would say, in the rotation. Yeah. So, but that is because in both positional groups right now, you're not seeing Snead or Awuzie, and you're not seeing Murray or Gray. So the question is like, again, it goes back to why is this the rotation? Again, I am sure there is a strategy to it and why they're working on things. I'd be curious if you think that Cedric Gray is your starter. He's either so good already that they're not putting him out there, or he's so far that he doesn't deserve the reps. Like I don't understand. I don't understand.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense, right? Like, I mean, because I talked about, he needs the reps. He needs the reps. He needs the reps.
Yeah.
So at some point, where we at? You need these reps.
Chef Rand says it. Got to prove it in pads. That's absolutely the case. That's the case for all of them. I mean, and not just the linebackers. That's the case for, Thomas Rush or anybody else. So I know you don't want to talk about Jaquan Jackson, but he was very good. He was very good this week. He got wide open.
When the pads come on.
That's right. But he got wide open many times today, and no one could throw him the football. So, all right. Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group are two great sponsors. Please remember them when you are purchasing booze or building a house. Just not at the same time. Don't drink the booze and build the house at the same time. That's why you let them do the work, let Kingston Group do the work, and go to Sinkers Beverages. Of course, Bluegrass Beverages up in Hendersonville, their sister store. That's like 80-plus years of serving the Nashville and Hendersonville markets. So make sure you check out those guys. Great, great, great local sponsors. They support the community, so you, the community, should support them as well. And, of course, you can get anything you want at either location. Great bourbon selection, great vodka selection, great wine, huge walk-in beer fridge. All the other like non-alcoholic drinks that they've got available. They got tons of mixed drinks that are available. They got all kinds of stuff. So make sure you check them out as well. Football and Other F Words back on the air. And you got, of course, SEC Football Live. You got the Gold Standard covering the Preds. You got all the other great shows, Hot Read, Paul Karski podcast, all the other stuff from across the network. We do appreciate all you guys listening. So give us a thumbs up, subscribe on the YouTube page, share it wherever you listen and watch. We do appreciate you guys, and write a review. That about does it, Zach. You got anything else? You got any other questions? Field goal, backup field goal kicker, a problem. He kicked one into the water, which is hard to do. No. It's hard to do. Hard to do that. Otherwise,
is it harder to kick one or harder to throw one?
Yes. I think the answer is equally bad if it happens on either one of those two plays. You have to shank it pretty bad to kick it into the water on the fly. And unfortunately, his name's Braden. So
there you go.
It makes sense. Tracks. Okay. All right. Special thanks to all you guys listening and hanging out. We do appreciate it. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group. For Zach, I am Braden. Thank you for listening and watching. Have a great weekend, everybody.